Hello.
Hello. How are
I want to begin again by welcoming everyone. I also do want to remember every participant that this session is being recorded and that you should feel free to change your pronouns and state your role in the coalition. The other thing I want to state is that if there are two reps from a school, we usually have one rep at each meeting. So please feel free to ensure that in your site, you're the only person representing currently. Um, I hope you all had a great fall break and especially enjoyed your time with family and friends. I do want to welcome our SCGC members, our board of directors, and my colleagues to ongoing discussions about enrollment and program balancing in Southeast schools. It has been an interesting journey, and we continue to make progress at each meeting. We look forward to doing the same thing tonight. We welcome Jed and Flu Analytics, Karina and Brick Architectural Firm, and our principals. At our last meeting, the SCGC members further discussed the two proposals, taking into consideration the updated guardrails presented by PPS. We also identified drivers for Proposal C. Tonight, with the support of Flu Analytics, we will share Proposal C. Our co-chairs, Beth Kavanaugh and Adriel Pearson, will share information from their different constituents. Our board members will also be sharing some information with the SEGC team. The proposed community meetings will begin on December 6th. The Community Engagement Office, headed by Shanice, have shared flyers that give more details about these meetings. Please visit our website for all the dates. I want to acknowledge that the PPS process of enrollment and program balancing for Southeast is highly emotional. We recognize that our families love their schools and their communities, and rightfully so, we applaud them. That said, our goal is always to optimize academic environments as we center the needs of all students. We acknowledge that holding a space for all our BIPOC families is essential to the success of this process, and that it is challenging, but we expect that that will be done in this meeting. That said, I do want to go ahead and read the land acknowledgement and anti-oppression statement, which is one of our guiding principles in this work. At PPS, we strive to strengthen our relationships with the Native community and Native nations. A symbol of this commitment is a land acknowledgement. These statements bring visibility to the first peoples of our collective home. This statement is meant to provide information and context while also encouraging all of us to reflect on our current day relationships with Native people and Native experiences. We acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional land of the Chinook, Clackamas, Kalapuya, Multnomah, Wasco, Clafmet, Tualatin, and Malala peoples. We also know that many other tribes made their home along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. We honor their history and acknowledge the sacrifices they made. Let us acknowledge the robust present-day federally recognized tribes of this area, the Grand Ronde, the Silex, the Cowlitz, and in addition, I would like to acknowledge the Chinook Nation, who has been seeking federal recognition for many years. The urban Indian community is made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country, representing 400 tribes. The urban Indian community has a vivid history made up of people whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking more opportunities. Next slide, please. Today, these tribes and communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. Within Portland Public Schools today, we serve students and families representing more than 150 different tribal nations within our education system. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, about the impact of colonization on our students, all students today, and make visible the multitude of Native families and many diverse ways Native communities and families are living in the present. We encourage every person to reflect on their own history, understand the history of colonization and genocide, and support Indigenous sovereignty, priorities, and actions. This acknowledgement is one that we can take to improve our support of Indigenous communities in the area. In addition to acknowledging the land and those that have been here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa, whose labor built the vast wealth of this country. These two communities and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined due to our existence within a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor, and every system and institution that impacts our lives is built upon this legacy. It is our job to speak that truth into spaces so that we can begin to heal. Next slide, please. Tonight, we will have a board update. We'll listen to our co-chairs as they share. We'll also have Proposal C ready to go, and then we'll engage in breakout sessions and discussion opportunities to help us further deepen our understanding around what the plan is in as we try to meet the charge. Next slide, please. At this point, I'd like to hand over the meeting to Karina from Brick Architectural Society.
Thank you, Dr. O. Welcome, everyone. Thank you again for joining us tonight. I wanted to take a moment to just review our group agreements as we always do. We are trying as best we can to kind of listen to the feedback that you've given us. So we have actually removed the check-in portion to allow us more time to engage with one another. We'll still be doing work in duos, but we will be doing it as it relates to having you all specifically address the reactions to Proposal C. So the group agreements you see in front of you are essential for us. Like Dr. O said, this can become, you know, really, these are really emotional decisions, or can be. And so we want to ensure that not only do you stay engaged, but speak your truth and ensure that you are managing your voice, so that way we can be sure that everyone that's part of the Southeast Guiding Coalition gets an opportunity to speak. We'll be doing that as we work through the small groups in our evaluation of Proposal C. And just know that you know, we're here to affirm that the vulnerability that people bring into the room. And so just wanted to take a moment to see, in addition to the group agreements that we normally have, is there anything else that you would like to see added tonight specifically to make you feel safe and brave in sharing this evening? You can either open up your mic or put something in the chat and we can modify on the spot. Okay. Not hearing anything, I think this is a good opportunity for us to transition to the district and board update. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz. Next, Lisa.
Hi there. Good evening, everyone. Claire Hertz, Deputy Superintendent for Portland Public Schools. We have 3 board members with us tonight. We have Chair Michelle DePass, we have Director Ailey Lowry, and we have Director Julia Brim-Edwards. So thank you all 3 for joining us. I want to start with two messages that I'm hearing lots of questions about. One is that we're confirming that the implementation will be fall 2023. And I do understand it is, that does cause some groups to wait that are anxious to have changes sooner. But I just, it's something that because of the staffing shortage across the country and actually around the world, it just, if we don't allow enough time for our staffing process, we won't have teachers in the classroom in the fall. And that would impact the whole district, district-wide. The second thing I wanted to share with you is that there's been questions about adding meetings, and we can add several meetings to help you support the finalizing your recommendation that you'll be bringing forward. So it is, right now we have meetings scheduled with to finish February 8th, but I'm feeling the pressure, and we will modify, we'll work with the co-chairs to see, to create a schedule that will fit in with the board schedule, as well as our need to finalize the proposal. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Director Lowry.
Hi, everyone. I want you all to know that while I'm not able to regularly make our meetings, I am following along with you all on the YouTube channel, and really appreciate all the work that this coalition has done. I know there were some questions at the last meeting about the board's intent and the what work we're asking you to do. This is a charter committee that's created by the board. And so we want to be really clear that our intent when we created this phase of the Southeast Guiding Coalition was really centered on both Lane and Harrison Park, and continuing the work of last round with really looking at comprehensive middle schools in Southeast. And so that is the vital work that the board has done. I know that there were some questions about, okay, if you're not going to staff up till 23, is there time to extend the process? Can we add more schools? And the board really wants us to, as a board, we really want to keep it simple in that we know that everyone is stretched beyond capacity right now. And so we don't want to increase this process or extend it. We know that there are schools that need attention. That's true throughout the district, that we need to look at our boundaries and continue this process. Unfortunately, we can't do everything all at once. And we have a plan and a process. And the next part of that plan is looking at high schools. So we're asking this committee to stay with that initial charge of really focusing on Lane and Harrison Park, completing the work in the timeline we had originally set out. And the only delay would be to the operations side of things. So your all's work won't change. It'll be the implementation of that work on our HR, our operations people, that they'll be delayed just due to the capacity issues as we continue to, I wish I could say as we continue to recover from the pandemic, but it feels like we're still in the middle of the pandemic. So as we continue to live with the realities of what COVID-19 has done in our world. And I think Julia is gonna say some words next about where we go from here.
Yeah, maybe it's, thank you, Director Lowry. Good evening, everybody. Maybe it's less about where we go from here, but I feel really strongly I want to take a moment to just acknowledge tonight that the work is not going to meet the timelines that we had been working towards. And I really want to take a moment to apologize to the families, the students and staff who were expecting that we would be able to implement this next year. And I'm sure it's disappointing. And I'm disappointed because I know for a long time that people in Southeast have been waiting for the work to happen. So I just want to acknowledge tonight that and apologize that we're not going to be able to hit that. And as Claire mentioned, and Director Lowry, because of staffing challenges, the timeline that we had originally set and that we really had put a pin in of getting this work done, it's not going to happen. And I know as a parent, every year is precious. And so while it may seem like, oh, it's just a year, I know that is meaningful to people. And so I just want to, as we, continue the work, but acknowledge that we're not going to meet the timeline that we'd originally set. And I'm sorry for that. And I will say that given that we're heading into an additional year, that we'll actively look for ways to strengthen the middle grades experience for those schools and impacted students in this year's budget process, which we've done in the past. And that doesn't in no way equates with having, the experience that we thought we would have this next year, but there are ways in the budget that we can be supportive. So I want to just put that on the table as well, that it's not just going to be there's a delay, and we're not going to try and also work to really make next year a stronger year for students and families. So thank you for letting me share just that thought, because having been a Southeast resident for a long period of time, I know people have waited a long time, and another year it's hard to accept.
Thank you, Directors Edwards, Lowry, and just wanted to now provide our co-chairs, Beth and Adrielle, an opportunity to share with you what they have been hearing and what they wanted to report back to us.
Hello. Some of these things that have been coming up over the last week are actually things that you all have touched on already as we're getting started today. I just want to clarify, these are things that have come up through emails to us, through other communication, through our Discord channel. And so our goal with this co-chair corner is not to like address or answer these questions necessarily, but to bring them to light and to air them so that it's clear both to PPS staff, the board, and community members who are engaging in this process, what kinds of things, like what kinds of discussions are happening behind the scenes. So one question we've been hearing is about, we've been hearing about data on student outcomes in co-located DLI programs. And as we're looking at proposals now that include both a whole school DLI model and co-located DLI models, I think it's really important to have a better understanding of those outcomes and how those two things compare and how they've compared in PPS schools. Let's see. Adriel, I know that I just sort of like popped these things in here, so you can jump in on any of these.
You're fine. I'll let you go. If there's something that I have a question about, or there's a question that I thought wasn't addressed, I'll jump in.
Okay. Okay, so another conversation that's been going on is on the process. Thinking about now that there are 3 proposals on the table, when do we need to determine, so what are the big moving pieces, the big programmatic pieces of the final the scenario that we will work on going forward to further refine and revise so that we can kind of plan out that timeline, which ties into the next bullet point about the timeline. It's feeling rather cramped as Claire mentioned, that there's only one meeting in December following the community outreach, in which I'm assuming we're going to be trying to synthesize a lot of what we've heard from the community. So when do we sort of determine what the big picture looks like that we're going to move forward with? And then how many meetings will we actually have where we can make sure we don't shortchange the boundary process and really hear from individuals, like what do the streets look like in their neighborhood? What are the things we really need to be aware of in terms of finalizing actual boundary recommendations? And then we had some questions about middle school assignments for fall of 2022. If implementation isn't until 2023, how do people know where they're going? And just wanting to be really clear with communities about where their 6th grader should be thinking about heading for next year and what that means when the process is actually implemented in 2023 in terms of staying with the program through that they start, or planning to leave in the middle of, or like what's that going to look like? And that's both for neighborhood programs and DLI programs. And then this is just coming up since very, hot off the presses since the proposal C was released. We were under the understanding that there would be supplemental materials showing the impact of CSS as a K-5 that many Guiding Coalition members have asked for. And so far, those aren't showing up in the materials. My understanding, based on some conversations today, is that we should be getting some of that. So I'm hoping,
Beth, I don't know if it would be helpful for me to step in. One thing that I mentioned earlier is that adding meetings so that there's time to complete the proposal, and we're really going to work with the 2 of you as co-chairs in designing that, and just remembering that it's not something, we're not going out to late spring, but adding a few more meetings. If we go another meeting later in the board process, we just need to make sure that we are their meetings get planned in advance. So we'll just have to work that through together. And then I thought we had the supplemental materials for K-5. Am I incorrect on that, Jed?
You're not incorrect. Yeah, that's in the folder that was shared last night. It's called C2, the data table there.
Oh, that was in the folder that was shared last night, or was it recently added? Because
it is, this is Judy, and it is in there today. It got added today. I think we still need to get the low income data in, but let's see, I'll copy it and put it in the chat. So if people want to get there directly.
Thank you.
So Adriel, if there's anything else that you're thinking about, and then also I was thinking, I've heard a lot from folks. So if I'm missing anything, I would love to give coalition members an opportunity to catch anything that we've missed.
I think I would just say, remember that there's the opportunity for the coffee chats. So there's still that option for you to reach out and be able to access PPS staff and talk about some of your questions as well. And then obviously our emails, we're available. We are going to be meeting tomorrow at 11 with a couple members. So we're definitely
12, I think it's at 12.
Okay. So we're open to check-ins with you all as well if you need clarification or if you have any questions that you want us to include in our meetings with our partners with PPS. So I'm talking about our meeting tomorrow, not the coffee chat.
Oh,
right?
sorry.
So 11, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, thank you, Adriel and Beth, for being that conduit to the district and to the planning team. Like you said, we do meet regularly. You all have greatly been gracious in attending 2 of our planning meetings to ensure that we are hearing firsthand these very things and trying to modify the plans as we go. Things like making sure that we've got paper handouts out to people. I know Judy was in her car this morning and handed out 12 packets, and there are more being mailed to a couple of folks who asked for that, and then there's some available at the district office for pickup. So if anyone wants to get paper copies, I think people appreciated that. And then to clarify, I saw some in the chat to reiterate what Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz said earlier. Yes, the idea is that there is, if we need additional time to get to a recommendation and to specifically address some of the boundaries, once we align on some version of a plan, there is willingness on PPS to do that, but it is a few weeks, not a few months. Exactly like Andy said, we want to get this work done so that way we can move towards implementation and also allow for the high school process to begin. Okay, with that, I think Deputy Superintendent Claire, I think you're right.
So one thing I want to do is introduce, we have another board member here, Director Constam is with us tonight. And if I've missed any others in the room, please let me know that you're here.
Is Director Green also on the call? Director Green?
Okay. There was a question in the chat earlier that was about kindergarten for 2022. Can't answer that on the spot tonight because it really depends on what the final proposal is and what's possible with transportation. If it's a walking school or not, there's a lot of things to consider there, but it's something that we'll want to make sure we're considering as we're finalizing our proposal, our recommendation from Southeast Guiding Coalition. Okay, and then on to proposal C. So we did our best to get this out as quickly as we could. And appreciate Judy sitting in a parking lot handing out packets. Thank you for doing that this morning, Judy. And also Gail for mailing them out to whoever requests that via email. So we'll get those out to you. And really wanted to, at this point, this I believe gets turned over to Jed. Is that correct on this part? I got that
no,
wrong.
I'm a few slides in after this.
Slides later. Okay, thank you. So what we have already discussed, previously for A and B, but now for C, there's a lot for us to consider, and we want to center on the drivers of the process and just remembering the board charge. I think we've reviewed that a few times of the focus of the process. And then if you'd move on to the next slide, please. Then we really are looking at our minimum size of middle school enrollment and elementary school enrollment. And really with boundary changes, it will be important to achieve these results. And there's already questions about some middle schools are larger than others. And that is true in the proposal C. And so having more time with boundaries will certainly help with that. And especially in some of our input from last time, where not to cross certain large, larger roads and streets in Southeast Portland, it makes it harder to balance the school size. So being responsive in C to what was asked for in our last session has made some of these imbalances. So we're going to have to do some give and takes on what is possible. And that's what we'll ask you as a coalition to talk through. Is it more important not to cross a major street, or is it more important to have more balanced size? So those are the gives and takes that we'll have to work through in the process. So then on to slide C, we've had programmatic guidelines from instructional leadership and with Southeast Guiding Coalition feedback to support the board's charge and help guide the Southeast Guiding Coalition and us in developing draft scenarios. So we did, these are the drivers that we've used based on all those pieces in developing proposal C. And at this point is where I would go on to the next slide, and that would be for Jed.
Such a good lead up to that, Claire. Thank you. And I think really well said on a number of fronts with the with some of the trade-offs that we're going to talk through here. So thanks for that. So the next series of slides are in the same format as we showed with draft proposals A and B. I'm going to move through these quickly as you'll have access to them on the Miro board, or if you were able to get printed copies, I'm happy to hear that happen as well. I'm going to highlight the key elements, and I'm going to move on to some slides that compare the proposals. And so if we could just move to the 2 slides from here. Perfect. So draft proposal C, program moves. The first key element that you're going to see here is that Bridger is the creative science site. And in the data tables that went out, you'll see that the functional capacity is a bit higher than shown for the previous proposals. And that's because we worked with facilities staff and have included additional capacity from the newer portables that are on that campus. So that added about 100 seats of capacity there. And that's really important capacity because it's needed to accommodate the near-term merging of the existing neighborhood program at Bridger and the creative science students that are currently in the K-8 program at Clark. The next element are programmatic changes at the middle school level, which are fewer than in previous proposals. So starting at Harrison Park, in addition to the current Chinese DLI program that is cited at that school, it will take on half of Southeast's Spanish DLI programming. Kellogg will host the other half of the Spanish DLI program, the middle school level. Programmatic changes at the elementary school level are also fewer than in previous proposals. The Bridger Spanish DLI program is the main program here that moves, with one of its strands being sent to Atkinson to join the existing strand of Spanish DLI that is there, and the other being sent to Lent to join the existing Spanish DLI program and single strand that is located there. So we're going to jump now to the next slide, which shows boundary changes, of which again, there are quite a few. But I want to just highlight some of the feeder changes specifically here. So as Claire mentioned in this proposal, we prioritize keeping to major roads as boundaries. And that did create some challenges for achieving minimum enrollment targets. And so minding major roads along with creative science at Bridger, that led to some feeder changes that we haven't seen in previous proposals. And so we start here with Lent feeding to Harrison Park to help meet Harrison Park's enrollment target. This is the first time we've seen Lent feeding anywhere besides Kellogg, even going back to phase 1. Lent moving to Harrison Park meant that another elementary school needed to move into the Kellogg feeder, which in this case is Atkinson, along with its co-located Spanish DLI programs, or strands rather. And then to help Lane to meet its enrollment target, we have Lewis moving into that feeder pattern. And so what folks, I think, will quickly see is that both Selwood and Mount Tabor are under the enrollment targets in this proposal, which again is in part due to the constraints of keeping the major roads. Also, the lack of programmatic moves plays a part of that, and trying to prioritize enrollment targets for our schools that have higher proportions of Black and Native and English learners. So next slide. So focusing on our racial equity impact measures here, similar to previous proposals, we're seeing improved conditions for our Black and Native and our English learner students relative to the region's current boundary and program configurations. But what we're seeing for the first time is that conditions, excuse me, do not improve when we look at all students, particularly for that middle school enrollment target. And again, this is in large part due to Mount Tabor and Selwood not getting up to that 500 enrollment target. Next slide, please. So now I'm just going to get into the side-by-side comparisons of draft proposals A, B, and C. And so we see consistency here about how Harrison Park converts to a middle school. We have the Harrison Park K5 cohort moving to the Clark campus. And again, that creates a need to find a location for creative science, which in this case is Bridger. Next slide, please. And so just to zoom in a little bit more on creative science, we've seen it at 3 different locations between these draft proposals. And I just wanted to highlight the first piece underneath each of the locations, that there's a near-term implementation consideration here that has really led to these 3 schools being looked at as the creative science location. And so that near-term implementation is that creative science students, they join the current K5 students at these schools. And these are the schools with the most space to accommodate all of those students. Now, as you're looking at the modeling and the enrollment estimates, that plays out a little bit differently. And I want to explain that. So the first step that we take to look at the long-term impact of this is to actually send creative science students and assign them to their neighborhood school based on their residence. So they come primarily from areas nearby the Clark building, but actually throughout the district. And then the next step we take is we redraw the boundary to meet enrollment expectations, which are similar enrollment that we see now at creative science, which is about 450 students total. The next step is to enroll essentially half the school with neighborhood students and half of the school with lottery students. And again, that neighborhood student piece is reliant on the boundary that is drawn to catch the right amount of students to essentially get that half of 450 students. I know lots of math here. Last bit, and that is that we apply estimates of where those lottery students are actually going to come from, and that's informed by where we see students enroll in creative science at its current location. We apply a similar approach there for nearness, essentially, of where we see those students come from. Okay, next slide. Oh, and I just wanted to mention really quickly, so this did come up. We did prepare an alternate data table for draft proposal C, where Bridger only hosts the K-5 cohort of creative science, and the middle school cohort is co-located at Harrison Park, which is the nearest middle school to Bridger. So you'll see how those numbers play out there. I will say that that creates a high utilization issue in the long term for Harrison Park that may require moving Lent or Vestal out of the Harrison Park feeder pattern to get utilization below 80%. And just working through the math on that, moving either Vestal or Lent out of that feeder pattern would allow Harrison Park to stay above that 500 enrollment minimum, assuming that those creative science students at the middle school cohort are assigned to that school. Okay, now really the next slide. All right, so a lot of information on this slide, but it's a breakdown of the different dual language immersion programming that we see across the different proposals here. And so a lot of this has been covered quite a bit, but I just want to highlight pieces of this. Draft proposal A is where Harrison Park hosted all of the Southeast and Chinese, all of the Chinese and Spanish DLI programs in Southeast. And what we had there was, actually we had Kellogg also hosting as well. In that case, Spanish was consolidated in a whole school lottery school at Lent, and Chinese was a whole school model at Bridger. In draft proposal B, Harrison Park hosts Spanish DLI that feeds from Bridger, and Lane actually hosts all of Chinese DLI. Slightly different approach to a whole school model at Lent, where the neighborhood boundary actually will enroll that program, much like Wriggler in Northeast. Similar regional whole school lottery model for Spanish DLI at Bridger, and then Woodstock would be the whole school Chinese DLI program. And then finally on to draft proposal C here. Harrison Park would retain its existing Chinese dual language immersion program. Spanish DLI would feed from Lent here, again, that maintaining that feeder alongside its neighborhood program. Both Lent and Atkinson are the schools that change from a programmatic standpoint here by gaining one of the strands of Spanish DLI from Bridger. Both of those schools get one of the two strands that are currently at Bridger. And then you see the feeder patterns there. And then, yes, yep, you're right on it. Next slide. And then finally, just meeting the minimum enrollment targets, as I've mentioned, the revisions for both draft A and B, they did require some pretty significant boundary shifts, some of them not keeping to major roads, just to make sure that we could get those enrollment minimums. We also saw some different feeder pattern changes in those proposals. The difference really with draft C is that, again, it attempts to stick with those main roads. And as Claire mentioned, the trade-off is that we can't always achieve those enrollment targets. Okay. And that, I believe, brings us to large group Q&A. Thanks, Karina.
Yeah, thank you, Judd. So I'm going to put back in the chat because it does seem like it has been buried. I know that there have been, since the proposal C was posted, there have been questions that that have been asked, that the SCGC has asked the district. And so I just posted a Google Doc that contains some of those answers. But this is our opportunity, or y'all's opportunity, to ask some questions. And when we see some of these coming in the chat, specifically the last one that I see there, Jed, is, can you address why a small part of the Lewis boundary will now be going to Woodstock?
Yes, I can. Yeah, so there's some boundary changes in keeping with actually Woodstock, that main road there, to get areas south of that road going into the lane feeder. That actually takes away some of the neighborhood program enrollment at Woodstock, and therefore to bolster it. And it's not like an easy decision, right? If people know this area, it's still a main road, Woodstock, in the area just north of Lewis, but it's got quite a few crosswalks in that area there to get north to Woodstock. So it's basically creating that balance that's needed between two strands of Chinese DLI that's at Woodstock and having two strands of neighborhood there. So need to kind of balance that by giving some area back to Woodstock.
Jed, my concern though is that Lewis enrollment will then drop down below where we're targeting. So that's why I was asking that. Gotcha.
Thank you.
There was also some clarification. I think there was, when you were talking about CSS, you had listed that the long-term goal was 50-50 neighborhood lottery. And I think Claire clarified that that was an initial goal with the goal of being 75-25 in the long term. So got that clarified. Trying to track all the questions that we got here.
So I think some of the things that people are pointing out that we've said are undesirable in the past are coming in the proposal. It's important to point out that when we try to do everything everyone asks for, it's just not possible to do that. So we've tried a different approach by adding some of the requests from the Southeast Guiding Coalition last time to some of the other pieces, but we had to give up in some areas in order to create a proposal. And so it doesn't mean that any of this is final. We need to take the best parts of A, B, and C and create what is the recommendation from the Southeast Guiding Coalition. We're just trying to show you as we implement different requests that other things get undone because it's not possible to do the other anymore.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the key thing for us to remember, especially as we're going into the work beyond tonight, the purpose of tonight is to better understand Proposal C, get questions understood about that, right? What we're going to focus on not only tonight as we start to examine that, but then also in the work that we're doing with community moving forward, are really what elements or attributes of each of the proposals are both desirable and less desirable for your particular school community and for the Southeast as a whole. So that's really kind of our goal tonight. Any other questions that people have? I'm not sure I am seeing. It's updated yet. Looks like there's some people are clarifying for themselves. Yes. Okay. So any questions that anyone has of Jed, any of the numbers or the big drivers that you saw for Proposal C before we get into having some discussion about that you think would be of value for everyone to hear?
There is a hand raised, Karina, from Sam Wilcox.
Yes, sorry, I was not able to see that. Sam.
Yes, hello, thank you. I have a question on the worksheet for potential CSS and neighborhood implementation data sheet.
Yes.
We're just noticing that like on the table, the third table for Bridger, in the classroom need total. There's no totals for like the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Unless I'm misreading it. So there's a total of 15 classrooms needed. That's mentioned on the table off to the side, with 16 available, 22 with modular. Yes, someone's pink thingy is on it right now. Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Good
Okay.
catch. I apologize. This crowdsourcing documents usually produces a good result.
Great, cool. Yeah, I was just wondering. So awesome.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions? Not seeing any more hands raised. All right, we are moving through this much more quickly than we thought we would, which is good. It will give us more time to talk about the proposals in our groups.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I do see a question. Olga Mat?
Yes, just my question. In proposal C, there's no longer, well, in other words, there's going to be the 3 schools remain, at least the ones that were designed to have DLI programs. The 3 of us are going to have co-located programs on proposal C. So the DLI only one strand is not anymore available in draft C.
So the proposal C, the intent of it was to create co-located models for some of the programs that are already in existence. That was a request from the Southeast Guiding Coalition.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And for clarification, there are 2 co-located DLIs, Spanish DLIs in this proposal. There are 3 now, but there would be 2 in proposal C. One is at Atkinson, one is at Lent.
Oh, okay, but then the purpose of not having co-located programs doesn't apply anymore.
Well, so I think in this proposal, I'm hesitant to say it doesn't apply anymore, right? Because this proposal was created as a result of some requests based on the previous proposals. The goal of this proposal is, or one of the drivers of this proposal is to show some co-located DLI programs while still trying to minimize single strands to the greatest extent possible. Because that is where the district was seeing the greatest inefficiency and porous student outcomes.
So like, well, in this case, for example, in Bridger, if that goes in effect, we're gonna have K5 creative science and K5 neighborhood. So it's still one neighborhood only, right? And same with the other schools, they only have one neighborhood school strand and then 2 DLI. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I understood.
Judy and Jed, I think the question is, would moving CSS to Bridger, and correct me, Olga Mat, if I'm not capturing your question correctly, I believe the question that's being asked is, by moving CSS to Bridger, does the math result in a single strand neighborhood? What we were trying to get rid of, Olga Mat, wasn't a single strand neighborhood, it was a single strand DLI. And I think the goal is to eventually get to a 75-25 for the neighborhood. That would be the neighborhood school versus the lottery, the CSS. And so I think that would be how I would answer it. But Judy and Jed, I want to confirm that is correct.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Sorry.
Okay, no, sorry. What I was like seeing is that, for example, my community wanted to remain with their neighborhood and the DLI, but in this proposal, for example, they just get rid of the 2 DLI. Finally, you don't want to have one only neighborhood, and in this one, you're still keeping only one neighborhood and just getting rid of the 2 DLIs that they had already. So they are affected. But I don't know, it's just a question. I am just trying to figure out to be able to explain.
Yeah, I think that what we were looking to do with Atkinson is marry up a single strand of Spanish DLI with one of the strands from Bridger. They already have 2 strands of neighborhood program there. And then for Lent, which currently has a single strand of each, in addition to moving one of the Bridger strands to join the Spanish DLI that's there, expanding the neighborhood boundary to get that enrollment up higher over 200 students. So we can get a second strand there for that balance, the 2 and 2 balance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and they aren't so much a strand anymore. It's just kind of a merging of those programs.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else have any questions?
I can't tell if my computer's working right.
Yes, Sandra.
Sorry.
I see it.
I'm home not feeling awesome today, so no video for me. You're spared that. I had put in the chat, I was just wondering on this worksheet for potential CSS plus neighborhood implementation, and thank you for this worksheet. This is great. Just under the assumptions, I'm looking at this, first the 20% and then the 50%, and those assumptions are for the neighborhood program. I believe that previously it was said that Flo was working with a 20% attrition assumption for CSS wherever location was changed. Oh, I see, Judy, you answered me in here, so I apologize, and I will stop talking now.
So the worksheet does include the assumption that 20% would opt out. Beth, I see your hand up.
I had to find my unmute button off of my other screen. So as we were gathering maps in person today, some brainstorming started, and we opened a Google Doc that I have added all of the SCGC members and PPS staff involved emails to as editors. And so if that would be helpful to just drop that in, it's just got features, pros, cons, suggestions of each of the 3 proposals as a way to capture some thoughts. And I'm wondering if I could put that in the chat right now. We could share it in the small groups, or I could send it out via email at a different time.
I'm thinking it would be good to talk about those in the small groups. We're going to have a good amount of time. We're going to have almost 45 minutes in the small groups, and then we can share it in those small groups. That's what makes sense to me, Beth. So that way we can, it's more than just getting it on there, but we can actually have a deep conversation about it.
Yeah. The idea is for folks to add their own things to it. It's just a starting point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. How are y'all doing? Could you benefit from a break before we go into, oh no, we were going to do a break after duos. So what we wanted to do tonight is, in addition to the small groups, so we will go into our regular Clackamas, Columbia, and Willamette small groups, but we thought there would be some value because we didn't do the check-in, but people really did see value in having smaller conversations to do that, to have an opportunity of doing duos and trios to check in on Proposal C specifically, some of the very things that we're talking about. So these are the questions that we're going to address in our small groups. So what elements of this proposal work well, and what moves farthest from what supports your community, right? Kind of what works well, what doesn't work well, and then which attributes of this proposal would create the greatest benefit to your community and to the Southeast as a whole. So the idea is that we'll break up into small groups, just 2s or 3s for 10 minutes to talk about this. And then that'll also give us an opportunity to share back with the traditional small groups, kind of some of the, the very things that you were doing in the parking lot, right? Right, Beth? Like, what were some things that generated out of that as you start to kind of work with each other to try and dissect this? That way we can have a richer conversation in the small groups. Anybody have questions about that? Okay. Marnie, I believe you are pushing us to the duos and trios, and we will do that for 10 minutes.
I am. You don't have to do anything. If you get put into a room and you should not be put into a room, just leave that and come back out. Also, if you've joined since I made these, I'll put you in kind of slowly as we move forward. So 10 minutes in duos and trios. Off you go.
Thank you. everyone. You are back just in time to go and take a bio break, grab something to eat, something to give you sustenance for the next hour or so. We will be back. So go ahead and turn off your cameras, turn off your mic, and we will see you all back at about in about 10 minutes. And we will go into our traditional breakout rooms at that time. We're still getting people back. Majority of folks, so maybe not. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome back, everyone. So we are going to now go into our traditional breakout rooms. You will have, again, a moderator, a note taker, and a flow person and a district educational leadership person in each of the rooms. The goal tonight is, again, to start thinking not only about Proposal C, well, in this case about Proposal C, but start thinking about this in the context of elements, right? So attributes or particular elements of this proposal that work well, and ones that don't work well, that move furthest from what supports your community, both at the local level, and then which of these components or attributes of this proposal create the greatest benefit to your community. Because we're thinking about this not as choose one, but rather kind of make up a proposal D, if you will. Any other thoughts, questions before we go into our breakout rooms? The link to the Miro board is in the chat. You don't feel like you have to participate in that link. Again, the moderators will share their screen, assuming we are all co-hosts. I believe we are. And Elisa, Marnie, don't forget to record, and we will see you back here in about 40 minutes. And
okay, again, I'm sending you all to the breakout rooms, and if you would rather not be in one and I have inadvertently put you in one, just come back on to the main room. And I'm passing this to you, Megan, because I will be in the breakout room. So I'm opening them now.
Nathan and I, we got you.
Okay, I'm opening them now. See you in a minute.
more quickly than we anticipated. We probably have about, I don't know, Marnie, check me on the session lab, but maybe about 30 minutes more of time. And so we wanted to, I don't know how all of the conversations are going. We're going to do a little bit of a share back here. And then we're going to be able to bring folks back together to say in a poll, do you want to go back to your rooms and continue the discussion? Or are you okay to end it after we kind of do a debrief from where we are? So maybe what we will do is, Marnie, thank you. Marnie, if you wouldn't mind sharing back what from your group, what you all talked about, or having someone, one of your note takers.
Absolutely. I was a note taker. So we did hear a lot about the CSS K-8. I think it was mentioned as a sacrificial hill, that things seem to be revolving around maintaining this K-8, whereas if it was K-5, it would be able to fit into lots of different schools. So wondering what is the sort of guiding principle behind that, and why is it being kept as a K-8 versus looking at a K-5 option. We looked at some of the numbers that seem to be a little bit off, and I would love to be able to tell you which ones those are. And I can't, but
I can
Jenny,
tell you that.
Okay, great. Jenny.
I can tell you that, Marty. Yeah, someone, Micah, thank you for pointing this out, and apologies for it being off, but you know, when we're putting these complicated things together pretty quickly, Kellogg, we were noticing that Kellogg, since it's getting Atkinson, should have a larger number of Spanish DLI students that would be coming from the Mount Tabor strand that is coming currently through Atkinson. And so wanting just to, if we're doing a little back of the napkin math, it'd be probably like a split of maybe, and Jed, correct me if I'm wrong, about 50-50 between at Kellogg and Harrison Park. So it'd be about maybe 110 students instead of 75 in Kellogg that is shown. So about 110. So we'll make that update. So yeah, thanks in the chat, whoever brought that up. Oh, that was from Micah. Yeah, so we'll get that updated in your utilization spreadsheets as well.
We also talked about the pros and cons of these smaller DLI programs and other programs, and I'm going to attempt to tell you the reason that these smaller programs are difficult on the schools is that it requires teachers to have multiple certifications, and so schools are having a hard time keeping teachers, keeping those people staffed, and having trouble finding people who have these multiple certifications, or they'll come in with one certification and then have to ramp up to another certification, and that's difficult. So there's often a lot of turnover. They have to have a world languages certification, and also, for instance, social studies certification if they are teaching one of these languages in social studies. So there are these barriers of these smaller programs. Also, the other side of that is these smaller programs have room to grow, whereas the larger don't. I wanted to say the equity, from an equity perspective, the Selwood and Lewis going to Lane, Micah thought that was spot on, that more affluent people live in the Lewis neighborhood, live west of 52nd. And so this adjustment is really great. Let's see. We talked about some of those, again, those kind of zigzagging boundaries that are bisecting some neighborhoods, and Jenny took notes of that, hoping to take a look at those to some other sort of main streets or better bisections versus going down the middle of a road that has neighborhood on both sides. Selwood enrollment seems low. Could the Chinese DLI move to Selwood was a question. Please, anyone from our group speak up if I missed anything.
Okay. Lisa, actually, why don't you want to go across to yours? Go ahead.
Either way, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me zoom in. All right. We talked about, also there's some questions, in our group about some of the numbers more so at Bridger, and there'll be some additional research on that. And then there was conversation around, a lot of conversation around actually opportunities that might be afforded with the delay, the implementation delay to 2023 of maybe working with the city on safe routes to schools, and maybe doing some offsite improvements to make things safer for students, and doing that in association with implementing the boundary adjustments. So there was a lot of discussion about that. There was talk about the impacts to special education students, and trying to bring awareness to that, right? That they're not disproportionately impacted by these changes. And then also part of the special education program goal that's in the long-range facilities plan is to be able to serve more special education students in their neighborhood schools, and how that ties into this. And then also just the inclusion model of special education, right? So then, fewer may be served in focused classrooms because more will be included in general classrooms. So there's some discussion around that. So Eddie talked about how he had some preliminary feedback from some of the Chinese community about scenario C, and just informally, found that people were really they seemed happy with the aspects of scenario C that would allow the co-location with neighborhood school, and so that was something that was very well received with the Chinese community. And discussion about the location of creative science, that this might feel scenario C might feel like a better fit versus the other two. A and B felt more like it was pitting creative science against the neighborhood programs, and this maybe felt like it would be a better fit to have it at Bridger. There was uncertainty around, what would happen to the displaced students if creative science or some of these other programs like, DLI strands, right, were moved into schools. Some felt like they weren't clear on if these other programs move into these designated schools, what happens to then the neighborhood kids, and so wanting more clarity around that. Let's see. Questions about at Lewis that enrollment numbers may not reflect what is being experienced today, and wanting some verification of that. I think that's a good sampling. Does anyone else want to chime in and add anything else?
Okay. So if you'll bring us over to Clackamas, I can do an update, and Kathleen, let me know if I'm missing anything. We kind of broke our conversation up into what we call positive attributes and attributes of concern. Some of the positive attributes is that the proposal C will solve a lot of the problems of having single strand. People were appreciative, at least in our group, about the careful consideration of some of the feedback that has been received, and integration of that, recognition that there's still tension between there. That from CSS community, that Bridger would be, at least from a proximity standpoint, close to their existing home, so more families in the community are likely to stay there. It was acknowledged that this is the only proposal that doesn't get rid of the Bridger Neighborhood Program. Also that in this proposal, Lane and Whitman are both the enrollment at both Lane and Whitman are increased to get it closer to that higher number that is the goal. There was a consideration that this one was most sensitive to the fact that there's a neighborhood program present at the sites, right? Thinking about what that looks like. The group felt that for the most part, even though there were some, once we refine and land on the sort of framework for the best proposal, that there will need to be some boundary cleanup. But for the most part, this had more commonsensical boundaries. Also, Harrison Park, there have been conversations within Harrison Park that the Chinese DLI families get to stay within the current boundary. What else? Hofsford having a DLI program there is important because it's part of that community. And, we had a lot of conversations around portables, what the right number was. We kind of went back and forth and what the value, the concern originally around is this the district changing a long held position around whether or not you could use portables to kind of solve a temporary problem. I think those were the majority of the positive attributes. Kathleen, let me know if I missed any on the positive side. Okay. Then the attributes of concern, the having enrollment over 500 could remove the Title I status. We talked about, there were a lot of people that talked about the impact of those to existing communities that they've seen, that probably in this case, but in the cases with all of the proposals, that there's some limitations to the projections, right? That this proposal C still has some schools with lower than target enrollment and some schools like Hofsford with relatively high enrollment, 98%. And there was also a lot of conversation around middle school DLI programs being split between two middle schools, talking about also, the idea of kind of what it looks like when you also have two language DLIs within a middle school. Also conversation about CSS specifically, kind of that C2 versus the C1 of a K5 versus a K8. Obviously a pretty strong interest by the CSS community, at least as expressed in our room, to maintain that K5 continuum. And so wanting to get a better understanding of that. And then a lot of conversation around kind of the intentional ResJ work that was done originally in phase 1 in the formation of Kellogg. And now, in none of these proposals is there, trying to find the justification that can't be found, at least to the Kellogg piece about creating a DLI strand at Atkinson and not leaving a robust Spanish program at Kellogg. Anything else, Kathleen, that I missed there?
I just saw a question about the potential change in Title I status at Lane. Basically, that came up because even if students are increasing, if the demographics are changing, it could cause schools to lose Title I status or to lose enrollment and funding, or make changes in enrollment and funding. In the case of Lane, that could change the resources available for students currently.
Correct. Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, so that's kind of the recap. So again, we've got about 30 minutes that we're playing with here. And so Nathan is going to be sending a poll out. The two options that we have are to we had good conversation, let's end the meeting early and then hear what the community has to say. The other is let's leverage these 30 minutes we have together and go back into small groups for that time and continue the conversation. So Nathan, can you pull the poll up, please? Okay, you all should be seeing the poll. and should be able to go back.
Okay, I was just wondering, I mean, if we've done small group discussion and there's no time for report back, maybe a large group discussion would be cool.
Okay, we'll that sounds good, Andrew. We'll see where kind of the group is landing. There's a pretty strong, at least, desire for, oh no, it's losing. Look at that. We were pretty strong at ending early, and we will see. Give it one more minute here. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. Looks like we're about 61% of folks that want to call it a night and about 40%, 60-40 for folks that want to go back into a small group discussion. So, and I don't want to split you up tonight. So it wasn't necessarily a clear, maybe what we'll do is we will go back into small groups unless anyone has an overwhelming desire. I'm trying to see if I have anything else. No, to go back into small groups for maybe 15 minutes. We'll kind of split the difference, and then we can call it a night. So if you wouldn't mind, Marnie, maybe just because there were some conversations that we can close up, give us a 15-minute head. Go back into the small groups, and then we'll be able to process what we heard in the large group together in our small groups, and then go back.
Sounds good. They're all ready to go. I'm going to open them right now.
Thank you. Those ends can always be pretty abrupt. So thank you for the added discussion. I think we certainly utilized it well in our room. Elizabeth, you were not able to get, you had a comment in the room and you were not able to get that voiced. Is that still your hand raised? Yeah.
No, it's a question because you were talking about the purple line and the racial equity. And what I thought Jed had said was you want the numbers to be lower in the purple line. And so what I thought I heard in the conversation was that they were almost double in the purple line in C.
No, in B. So they were the best in C. They were half of what they were in A and B.
I'm sorry. I was thinking.
All right, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight. I think we were able to dig deep into these you know, into proposal C, get a better understanding of it, start having conversations around which attributes of the proposals kind of seem to make the most sense for not just individual communities, but for Southeast as a whole. So I believe, will you pull the presentation back up, Elisa? Please.
You see that?
I do see it. Will you go into presentation mode?
Oh, sorry. How's that better?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, Shanice. So what we want to talk about a little bit is kind of where we are in terms of now opening this up to the community, because again, what we're doing for the community is really asking them the same questions, to look across all three proposals and focus on what are the attributes that are of best interest to them for their community and for the Southeast as a whole. And then we can talk a little bit about kind of what the next steps are and how we then take this information and come back in our next meeting. Go ahead, Shanice.
Great. And I know we have taken a look at these dates, but we're coming up next week with a series of engagement opportunities where what we have been reflecting on throughout our time together with our updated proposal C will be available for members of the PPS community to also give their input and insight on and reflect on what works for them. I want to note though, we were able to reschedule our session that will be available for teachers. And so that will be happening on December 9th and was rescheduled. On the next slide, there's a little bit of information on the goal of our open house. And I mentioned that these opportunities, in addition to our affinity-based spaces and the open house, will go through that same content, but we'll go through those themes that we have really been working through and that have informed these proposals. And having input from our communities, especially our Black, Indigenous, people of color, and multilingual communities is essential. And so we're having dedicated spaces for those folks to work through it. But we absolutely think that having the listening and learning themes that we have made as a foundation in this work, as well as reflecting on the outcomes of the phase 2 process with the 3 proposals are kind of the 3 major pieces of our engagement, and will be available in multiple languages and also an exclusive space for our students and BIPOC students. And Karina, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, one of the questions that we got in the chat was kind of which of these can and should the SCGC members attend in addition to the open house ones. And I will say, kind of to reiterate what you talked about, the goal of the affinity groups is to preserve those affinity groups, right? So we would ask you to honor that, to not attend any ones for which you are not part of that affinity group, and really kind of focus your participation in the open house. Shanice, anything else that you would add to that?
Yes, I think that's correct. And on the open house, I think is a great opportunity to also hear what folks of our community are sharing with us. But then we'll be doing that all in a public fashion with you all, and have a really deep analysis of everything that we've learned at the end of the process. So we'll have all of that information public. And so hopefully that's helpful for folks who are interested too in what is coming up in the individual sessions.
For sure. Noelle, I see you've got your hand raised.
Hey, I was just going to mention, I think as part of our engagement, we're also going to be doing special education focus groups. Is that different than what this is?
Shanice, I'm going to leave that one.
So I know we'll be hosting them, and I know I'm working from home, so we're not talking as much, but I was just going to say, when we get those dates up, if people want to attend those, they're welcome to.
Yeah, so I think that the general theme to try and get community input is threefold. One is the large open house on the 8th from 6 to 8. The second are these affinity-based, so what we're calling kind of focus groups, listening and learning sessions. And the third are kind of principal-led or school-based conversations. The goal is to provide every single one of those groups, whether it be the open house or the affinity groups or the principals, the same content, right? The same presentation, try and ensure that we're trying to get to the same questions. So as we are analyzing all of that data and bringing that to you, we are doing that in a way that is as consistent as possible.
Brown stick thing all over the place.
I don't know, somebody's unmiked. There you go, or mic'd. Okay, then maybe 2 slides, Elisa. So our next steps will really be this intentional, widening our lens, if you will, having conversations in open houses and in these focus groups to continue this conversation and to report that back to you. I know there was some questions about whether or not the co-chairs chat is still occurring tomorrow. I think we have confirmation now that it is still, the co-chairs chat is occurring tomorrow from 12 to 1. If you don't see a calendar invite for that, or if for whatever reason that got removed from your calendar, Megan has put her email in the chat. And then maybe Judy or Claire, one of you, because one of the big questions we had was then what, right? How does this then get processed into how do these proposals get tweaked into what I'm going to call proposal D, or a refinement of any of these proposals based on the input? So maybe kind of what are the next steps for the SEGC?
I was hoping to be able to attend one of the BIPOC listening sessions. I'm sorry I can't, but I just want to give a shout out to Shanice Clark and your shop for doing such an intentional, wanting to listen to communities and doing it in creating safe spaces for those communities. Just want to thank you for that. That's good work. That's some good trouble.
Yeah, exactly. We did it at the beginning, and so what we committed is that we would go back to those groups at all of the points in the process. So that's our commitment. Chair DePass.
So approach we took, so your earlier question, Karina, an approach we took in phase 1 is we had volunteers come together and put together a proposal that then came forward to the Southeast Guiding Coalition. So that might be one way to approach it. So when we come back at our next meeting, we'll go through the engagement and what we've heard from the various voices. And then we will also, what we've started doing tonight are things that are the positives and the things that are question marks, maybe not so positive, and just kind of framing that for each of the proposals. And then so we can pick out the attributes that are the ones that are carrying forward as things that people have a strong support of, and then really working with our co-chairs and other volunteers to try to put a proposal together. Now that's the way we did it last time, but I will also say it that might be difficult in the terms of the timing because of winter break. So I just want to say that there'll be some of us that will need to be working on this at winter break. So
go ahead.
Judy, is there something else that you'd want to add to that?
No, I think that I'm really excited for the week coming up and the meeting after that. I think that December 16th meeting is going to be an important one for us to sort of set the pace for and really letting you or seeing how you all as a coalition come together around new ideas. It's been a while in coming, and I know you're anxious to do that, and we're anxious to support you. And hope it's going to lead to a really successful set of meetings in January. We do need to work on getting a solid schedule for that.
Thank you, Judy. Okay, Esther, can we ask you to close us, please?
All right, everybody, thank you so much again for a very, very informational session this evening. We do want you to know that we do appreciate your input, your willingness to collaborate, your willingness to share and wrestle through all the uncertainties of the different proposals. We also want to thank our school leaders who continue to provide a space for the broader school community so that everybody's voice is represented at the table. We know that our school leaders have also been talking with their staff members and gathering information from communities that would not have heard from. Please, as much as possible, get that information to us as soon as possible. Conversations are ongoing, decisions haven't been made yet. Before you leave tonight, we will ask that you please complete the feedback form. The feedback form is used to design upcoming meetings. We take your input into consideration and we try to design sessions that meet your needs. We also want you to remember that our next meeting will be on the 16th of December, and that when we have our community listening sessions, we encourage that you attend and that you have as many people within your community attend those sessions as possible. So again, please participate in our community listening events and encourage people to attend. And that said, I want to thank you all for a pleasant evening, for a very collaborative evening, for the information generated as a result of Proposal C being introduced, and we will see you again on the 16th of December. Have a great night, drive safe, and see you next time.
Thank you, Dr. O.